Picture this. You're a woman in a world where people constantly underestimate you. They see your gender before they see your skills. They assume you're weak before you even speak. Now imagine sitting peacefully, maintaining your equipment, when suddenly a stranger appears and challenges everything those doubters believe about you. This is the true story of Sarah Chun, a former Marine Corps Scout sniper whose quiet afternoon at a remote shooting range turned into a moment that would define not just her reputation, but her entire future. It's about precision under pressure, respect earned through action, and the split second when someone's life can change forever. What happens when talent meets opportunity in the most unexpected way? What happens when years of training, discipline, and determination collide with a single, impossible shot? This is that story. This is about the day Sarah Chun proved that the deadliest weapons aren't always the loudest ones, and sometimes the most powerful statement you can make is delivered in complete silence. The range was quiet that Tuesday afternoon. Too quiet, some might say. But Sarah Chun had learned long ago that the best snipers are comfortable with silence. She had no idea that in the next few minutes, her entire world would shift, and a casual conversation would lead to the most important shot of her life. Sarah Chun had always found peace in the methodical cleaning of her rifle. The familiar weight of the weapon in her hands, the smooth precision of each component as she broke it down, cleaned it, and reassembled it with practiced efficiency. Today was no different, except for the unusual emptiness of the Blackwater Ridge shooting range. Most days, the range buzzed with activity. Local law enforcement officers maintaining their qualifications, hunters preparing for season, and weekend warriors trying to impress their friends with loud boasts and louder gunfire. But Tuesday afternoons in late September had a different quality. The summer crowds had disappeared, and the serious shooters hadn't yet arrived for their weekly practice sessions. Sarah preferred it this way. At 28, she had spent 6 years as a Marine Corps Scout sniper before transitioning to civilian life 8 months ago. The adjustment hadn't been easy. Corporate security consulting paid well, but it lacked the purpose and intensity she had grown accustomed to during her military service. These quiet moments at the range, maintaining her skills and equipment, provided a connection to the person she used to be. She sat at the covered shooting bench closest to the tree line, her custom-built .308 Winchester partially disassembled on the weathered wooden surface. The rifle was her pride and joy, a precision instrument she had spent countless hours and significant money perfecting. Every component had been carefully selected and tested. The stock, barrel, trigger, and optics worked together in perfect harmony, capable of placing shots within a quarter inch at 100 yards under ideal conditions. The afternoon sun filtered through the pine trees surrounding the range, casting long shadows across the shooting lanes. A gentle breeze carried the scent of pine needles and the distant sound of traffic from the highway. Sarah found herself relaxing for the first time in weeks. Her current assignment involved providing security consultation for a technology company whose executives received regular death threats. The work was lucrative but tedious, involving more paperwork and meetings than actual security work. As she carefully cleaned the rifle's bolt carrier group, Sarah allowed her mind to wander to her time in the Marines. The missions in Afghanistan had been intense and dangerous, but they had also provided a clarity of purpose she sometimes missed. Every shot had mattered. Every decision had consequences that extended far beyond her own comfort or career advancement. Her phone buzzed with a text message from her business partner, Marcus Rodriguez, another former Marine who had helped her establish their security consulting firm. The message was brief and direct, typical of Marcus. Henderson Industries wants to extend contract. Good money. Call when you get this. Sarah smiled slightly as she read the message. Henderson Industries had been their first major client, and extending the contract would provide financial stability for at least another year. She made a mental note to call Marcus later that evening, after she finished her range session. The sound of gravel crunching under footsteps interrupted her thoughts. Sarah looked up to see a pickup truck pulling into the parking area behind the shooting positions. The vehicle was a late-model Ford, well-maintained but showing signs of regular use. 2 men climbed out, both carrying rifle cases and wearing clothing that suggested they were experienced shooters rather than casual visitors. The first man appeared to be in his 50s, with graying hair and the confident posture of someone accustomed to being in charge. He wore tactical-style clothing and moved with the efficiency of a professional. The second man was younger, perhaps in his early 30s, with dark hair and an athletic build. Both men carried themselves with the unmistakable bearing of current or former military personnel. Sarah continued her work, acknowledging the newcomers with a brief nod when they glanced in her direction. She had learned long ago that shooting ranges operated under an informal code of conduct. Experienced shooters respected each other's concentration and avoided unnecessary conversation unless invited to engage. The two men set up at a shooting bench approximately 50 yards to Sarah's left. From her peripheral vision, she could see them unpacking what appeared to be high-end equipment. One of the rifles looked like a precision bolt-action weapon similar to her own, while the second appeared to be a semi-automatic platform optimized for accuracy. As Sarah reassembled her rifle, she noticed the older man observing her work. His attention wasn't intrusive or inappropriate, but rather the professional interest of one expert watching another. She had experienced this type of observation before, particularly from male shooters who were curious about her capabilities. Some were respectful and genuinely interested in technique, while others were skeptical or condescending. After completing her cleaning routine, Sarah decided to fire a few groups to verify her rifle's zero before concluding her session. She loaded 5 rounds of her carefully prepared hand-loaded ammunition into the magazine and settled into her shooting position. The targets were positioned at 100 yards, a distance that allowed her to accurately assess her rifle's performance without requiring the extreme precision needed for longer shots. Her first group measured just under half an inch, center to center. The second group was slightly larger, approximately 3/4 of an inch, but still well within acceptable standards for precision shooting. Sarah felt satisfied with the rifle's performance and began preparing to pack up her equipment. "Excuse me," a voice said from behind her. Sarah turned to see the older man approaching her position. Up close, she could see that he was probably in his mid-50s, with intelligent eyes and the weathered face of someone who had spent considerable time outdoors. His clothing was expensive but practical, and he moved with the controlled grace of someone who remained in excellent physical condition despite his age. "I'm sorry to interrupt," the man continued, "but I couldn't help noticing your shooting. Those are impressive groups." "Thank you," Sarah replied, maintaining a polite but neutral tone. She had learned to be cautious about unsolicited compliments from strangers at shooting ranges. "I'm Colonel James Harrison, retired Army," the man said, extending his hand. "Currently working as a contractor for various government agencies." Sarah shook his hand, noting the firm grip and direct eye contact. "Sarah Chun, former Marine Corps. Scout sniper?" Harrison asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "That's right," Sarah confirmed. 6 years active duty. Harrison nodded approvingly. "I thought so. The way you handle your equipment, your shooting position, the precision of those groups. You don't see that level of proficiency very often." Sarah began to pack her cleaning kit, unsure where the conversation was heading. Military veterans often enjoyed sharing stories and comparing experiences, but something about Harrison's demeanor suggested this interaction had a specific purpose. "My colleague and I are conducting some training exercises," Harrison continued, gesturing toward the younger man who remained at their shooting position. "We're working on extreme long-range precision shooting. Very specialized requirements." "Sounds interesting," Sarah replied, though she wasn't sure why Harrison was sharing this information with her. Harrison paused for a moment, studying Sarah with the calculating gaze of someone making an important decision. "Would you be interested in observing? We could use an experienced spotter, and I have a feeling you might find the challenge educational." Sarah considered the offer. She had no pressing obligations for the remainder of the afternoon, and the mention of extreme long-range shooting had piqued her professional interest. Long-range precision shooting had always been one of her strengths, and she was curious about what kind of training exercises a retired colonel might be conducting. "What exactly are you working on?" she asked. Harrison smiled, and Sarah detected a hint of something that might have been excitement or anticipation in his expression. "How familiar are you with shots beyond 1,500 yards?" I've made successful shots out to 1,800 yards in combat situations, Sarah replied. Trained extensively at distances up to 2,000 yards. Excellent, Harrison said. What we're working on today is considerably more challenging. We're attempting to engage targets at extreme distances under field conditions. The kind of shots that require perfect technique, ideal equipment, and a considerable amount of luck. Sarah's interest was definitely engaged now. Extreme long-range shooting was as much art as science, requiring an understanding of ballistics, meteorology, and human physiology that went far beyond basic marksmanship skills. The challenge of placing precise shots at distances where the smallest error could result in complete misses was something that had always fascinated her. I'd be interested in observing, she said. Harrison's smile broadened. Outstanding. Pack up your equipment and meet us at Position 7. That's where we'll be setting up for the long-range work. Position 7 was located at the far end of the shooting range, where the longest shooting lanes extended into the forest beyond. Sarah had never used that particular position, partly because it required special permission from the range management, and partly because the distances involved were beyond what most civilian shooters ever attempted. As she packed her rifle case and gathered her equipment, Sarah felt a familiar excitement building. The kind of anticipation she had experienced before particularly challenging missions during her military service. She had no idea what Harrison and his colleague were planning, but instinct told her that the next few hours would be unlike anything she had experienced since leaving the Marines. The walk to Position 7 took several minutes, as the shooting bench was located nearly a quarter-mile from the main range facilities. The position itself was more elaborate than the standard shooting benches, featuring a concrete pad, adjustable bench, and sophisticated wind measurement equipment. Clearly, this was designed for serious long-range work. Harrison's colleague was already setting up when they arrived. Up close, Sarah could see that he was younger than she had initially estimated, probably in his late 20s, with the lean build and focused intensity of an active-duty special operations soldier. Sarah, meet Captain David Kim, Harrison said. Dave, this is Sarah Chun, former Marine Scout sniper. She's going to observe our session today. Kim looked up from his equipment setup and nodded politely. Pleasure to meet you. Always good to work with experienced personnel. Sarah could see that Kim was assembling what appeared to be a custom-built rifle chambered in .338 Lapua Magnum, a cartridge specifically designed for extreme long-range shooting. The rifle itself was a work of art, featuring a precision barrel, high-end optics, and a stock that had been modified for optimal ergonomics and stability. What's the target distance? Sarah asked. Harrison pointed toward the forest beyond the shooting lanes. There's a clearing approximately 9,200 yards in that direction. We've positioned a target there for today's exercise. Sarah felt her eyes widen slightly. 9,200 yards was nearly 5¼ miles. She had heard of successful shots at such distances, but had never attempted anything beyond 2,500 yards herself. At that distance, the bullet would be in flight for approximately 10 seconds, and factors like wind, temperature, humidity, and even the rotation of the Earth would significantly affect the bullet's trajectory. That's quite a challenge, she said, trying to keep her tone neutral despite her growing excitement. Indeed it is, Harrison agreed. The shot requires perfect conditions, flawless technique, and equipment operating at the absolute limits of its capabilities. We've been working up to this distance for several months. As Kim continued his setup, Sarah observed the methodical precision with which he worked. Every movement was deliberate and efficient, suggesting extensive training and experience. The equipment itself was impressive, representing thousands of dollars in precision components and custom modifications. Have you attempted this shot before? Sarah asked. Several times, Kim replied. We've come close, but haven't achieved a confirmed hit yet. The conditions have to be perfect, and there are so many variables that can affect the shot. Harrison pulled out a tablet computer and began checking weather data. Wind conditions look favorable today. Temperature is stable, humidity is within acceptable parameters, and the barometric pressure is steady. If we're going to make this work, today might be the day. Sarah found herself drawn into the technical aspects of the challenge. Long-range shooting had always appealed to the analytical side of her personality, the part that enjoyed solving complex problems with precise solutions. The mathematics involved in calculating a shot at such extreme distance were fascinating, requiring an understanding of physics that went far beyond basic marksmanship. As the afternoon progressed, Sarah realized she was witnessing something extraordinary. The level of preparation, the quality of equipment, and the expertise of the two men suggested this was far more than a casual training exercise. This was serious business, the kind of precision shooting that had real-world applications in military and law enforcement operations. She settled in to observe, unaware that within the next hour, her own skills would be put to the ultimate test. The precision required for a shot at 9,200 yards became apparent as Sarah watched Harrison and Kim methodically prepare their equipment. Every detail mattered at such extreme distances. The slightest miscalculation or equipment malfunction would result in a miss measured not in inches, but in yards. Kim's rifle was mounted on a specialized bipod system that allowed for micro-adjustments in both elevation and windage. The scope was a Schmidt and Bender 5-45x56mm, one of the most precise optics available for long-range shooting. Even with such high-end equipment, the target at nearly 5¼ miles would appear as little more than a tiny speck through the scope. The biggest challenge isn't the distance itself, Harrison explained to Sarah as Kim continued his preparations. It's the time of flight. At this range, the bullet will be airborne for approximately 10 seconds. During that time, wind conditions can change, the target can move, and atmospheric conditions can shift. Sarah nodded, understanding the complexity involved. During her military service, her longest confirmed kill had been at 1,847 yards, a shot that had required 3 attempts and perfect conditions. The mathematics involved in calculating a shot at 9,200 yards were exponentially more complex. How do you account for the Coriolis effect? She asked, referring to the influence of Earth's rotation on projectile trajectory. Excellent question, Kim replied, looking up from his rifle setup. At this distance, we have to account for approximately 4 inches of deflection due to Earth's rotation. We also have to consider the Magnus effect, spin drift, and vertical deflection due to the Yevoush effect. Sarah was impressed by Kim's technical knowledge. The factors he mentioned were advanced concepts that most shooters never needed to consider, but, at extreme distances, they became critically important. Harrison pulled out a weather station device that measured wind speed, direction, temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure. We've been monitoring conditions for the past hour, he said. Wind is currently steady at 3 to 5 miles per hour from the northwest. Temperature is 68 degrees Fahrenheit. Humidity is 45%, and barometric pressure is stable at 30.1 inches. The level of detail was impressive, but Sarah understood its necessity. At 9,200 yards, a change in wind speed of just 1 mile per hour could result in a miss of several feet. Temperature affected air density, which influenced bullet trajectory. Humidity and barometric pressure had similar, though smaller, effects on projectile flight. Kim finished his rifle setup and began the process of range finding and calculating his shooting solution. He used a combination of laser rangefinder, ballistic computer, and weather station to generate firing data. The process took nearly 20 minutes, highlighting the complexity of the shot. Confirmed range is 9,196 yards, Kim announced. Elevation adjustment is 42.7 minutes of angle. Windage adjustment is 2.3 minutes left for current wind conditions. Sarah quickly did the mental math. At that distance, 42.7 minutes of angle translated to approximately 400 inches of bullet drop. The bullet would follow a rainbow-like trajectory, climbing to a maximum height of several hundred feet before descending toward the target. What ammunition are you using? Sarah asked. Custom hand-loaded .338 Lapua Magnum, Kim replied. 300-grain Berger very low-drag bullets, loaded with 92 grains of H-1000 powder. Muzzle velocity is approximately 2,800 feet per second. Sarah recognized the components as top-tier equipment. The Berger VLD bullets were specifically designed for extreme long-range shooting, featuring a boat-tail design and high ballistic coefficient that helped maintain velocity and resist wind deflection over long distances. Harrison positioned himself behind a high-powered spotting scope mounted on a separate tripod. "I'll be spotting for bullet trace and impact," he explained to Sarah. At this distance, even with perfect conditions, seeing the bullet impact can be challenging. The spotting scope was a Leupold Mark IV with 60x magnification, specifically designed for long-range observation. Harrison adjusted the focus and began scanning the target area, which was barely visible as a small clearing in the forest canopy. "Target is visible," Harrison reported. "No movement in the area. Wind appears steady across the entire trajectory path." Kim settled into his shooting position, adjusting his body alignment and verifying his sight picture. The shooting process for extreme long-range shots was deliberate and methodical, with each step carefully executed to eliminate variables that could affect accuracy. "Breathing pattern established," Kim reported. "Natural point of aim confirmed. Ready for final wind check." Harrison consulted his wind measurement device and observed the mirage patterns visible through his spotting scope. Mirage was caused by heat rising from the ground and could provide valuable information about wind conditions across the bullet's trajectory path. Wind remained steady at 4 miles per hour from the northwest, Harrison confirmed. Mirage patterns indicate consistent conditions across the entire range. Sarah found herself holding her breath as Kim prepared to take the shot. She had witnessed many challenging shots during her military career, but nothing approaching this level of difficulty. The combination of distance, environmental factors, and equipment requirements made this shot extraordinary. "On target," Kim announced, indicating he had achieved a stable sight picture and was ready to fire. "Wind steady," Harrison confirmed. "You are clear to fire when ready." Kim controlled his breathing, settling into the natural respiratory pause that occurs between exhalation and inhalation. Sarah could see the intense concentration on his face as he prepared to press the trigger. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the range. Through Harrison's spotting scope, they could track the bullet's path by observing its trace in the air. At such extreme distance, the bullet flight time was long enough to follow its trajectory visually. "Bullet trace observed," Harrison reported. "Flight path appears stable. Time of flight, 8, 9, 10 seconds. Impact observed, approximately 15 yards left and 20 yards long." Kim's first attempt had missed the target, but the miss was relatively small considering the distance involved. 15 yards at 9,200 yards represented an angular error of less than 1 minute of angle, indicating that his equipment setup and calculations were very close to correct. "Wind must have been stronger than estimated," Kim said, making notes in his shooting log. "The long impact suggests slightly lower air density than calculated." Harrison nodded in agreement. "Let's wait a few minutes and observe wind conditions before attempting the second shot." During the waiting period, Sarah found herself analyzing the technical aspects of the shot. The miss had been close enough to suggest that success was achievable with minor adjustments to the firing solution. The challenge was determining exactly what corrections were needed. "Have you considered using a different ballistic coefficient for your calculations?" Sarah asked. "Sometimes the published BC numbers don't match real-world performance, especially at extreme distances." Kim looked interested in her suggestion. "That's a good point. We've been using the manufacturer's published BC of 0.818, but our observed trajectory suggests it might be slightly lower in these conditions." Harrison lowered his spotting scope and turned to Sarah. "You're thinking like a sniper," he said with obvious approval. "Most shooters would focus on wind or range errors, but BC variations can have significant effects at extreme distances." Sarah felt a familiar excitement building as she became more involved in the problem-solving aspect of the shot. Long-range shooting had always appealed to both the technical and competitive sides of her personality. The challenge of solving complex ballistic problems under pressure was something she had genuinely missed since leaving military service. "If you adjusted the BC down by 2% and corrected for the observed wind deflection, the next shot should be much closer," she suggested. Kim made the calculations on his ballistic computer and nodded approvingly. "That would give us an elevation adjustment of 43.1 minutes and windage of 1.8 minutes left. Definitely worth trying." As Kim made the adjustments to his scope, Harrison approached Sarah with a thoughtful expression. You mentioned your longest confirmed shot was 1,800 yards. Have you ever attempted anything beyond 2,000? Not in real-world conditions, Sarah replied. I trained on targets out to 2,500 yards, but never had a mission requirement for anything longer than 1,800. Harrison studied her for a moment, and Sarah sensed he was evaluating something beyond her technical knowledge. What would you say is the most important factor in extreme long-range shooting? Equipment, environmental conditions, or shooter skill? Sarah considered the question carefully. All three are essential, but if I had to choose one, I'd say consistency. Consistent technique, consistent equipment performance, and consistent environmental assessment. The best equipment in the world won't help if the shooter isn't consistent in their approach. Interesting answer, Harrison said. Most people would say equipment or environmental conditions. Equipment and conditions are important, Sarah agreed. But they're variables you can measure and account for. Human consistency is the hardest factor to control, especially under pressure. Kim had finished his scope adjustments and was preparing for his second attempt. Corrections applied, he reported. Elevation up 0.4 minutes. Windage right 0.5 minutes. Harrison returned to his spotting scope while Sarah continued to observe the process. The level of precision and attention to detail was impressive, representing years of training and thousands of dollars in specialized equipment. Conditions remained stable, Harrison reported. Wind steady at 4 miles per hour from the northwest. Temperature unchanged. You are clear for attempt number 2. Kim settled into his shooting position and began the methodical process of achieving a perfect sight picture. Sarah could see the intense concentration required for such a challenging shot, the kind of mental focus that blocked out all external distractions. The second shot followed the same careful preparation as the first. Kim controlled his breathing, verified his natural point of aim, and slowly pressed the trigger straight back until the rifle fired. Again, they tracked the bullet's flight path through Harrison's spotting scope. The 10-second flight time seemed to stretch endlessly as they waited for impact confirmation. Impact observed, Harrison announced. Approximately 8 yards right and 5 yards short. Much closer than the first attempt. The second shot had been significantly more accurate, missing the target by less than 10 yards at a distance of over 5 miles. Sarah found herself genuinely impressed by Kim's shooting ability and the quality of their equipment setup. That's an exceptional shot, she said sincerely. At that distance, a 10-yard miss is practically a bullseye. Kim smiled, obviously pleased with the improvement. The corrections helped significantly. One more minor adjustment should put us on target. As Kim prepared for his third attempt, Harrison approached Sarah again with what appeared to be a more serious expression. Sarah, he said quietly, what I'm about to ask may sound unusual, but I have a proposition for you. Sarah looked at him curiously, wondering where the conversation was heading. We've been working on this shot for months, Harrison continued. Dave is an exceptional marksman, but he's been struggling with the final few yards of accuracy. Sometimes a fresh perspective can make the difference. Sarah began to understand where the conversation was going, and felt her heart rate increase slightly. Would you be willing to attempt the shot yourself? Harrison asked directly. We have complete confidence in Dave's abilities, but I suspect you might bring a different approach to the challenge. The question caught Sarah off guard. She had been thinking of herself as an observer, not a participant. The idea of attempting such an extreme shot was both exciting and intimidating. I appreciate the offer, she said carefully, but my rifle isn't set up for that kind of distance. The scope and ammunition would need to be completely different. We brought backup equipment, Harrison replied. Identical rifle, same scope and ammunition. It would take about 10 minutes to get it zeroed for your shooting position. Sarah felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with accepting a challenging mission. The opportunity to attempt a shot that would represent the absolute pinnacle of long-range marksmanship was incredibly tempting. But something about Harrison's demeanor suggested this was more than just a training exercise or friendly competition. There was an underlying seriousness that indicated this shot had real-world importance. Before I answer, she said, I'd like to know exactly what this is really about. Harrison exchanged a meaningful glance with Kim before responding to Sarah's question. The casual atmosphere of the afternoon training session suddenly felt more serious. charged with an undercurrent of purpose that Sarah hadn't initially recognized. "You're right to ask," Harrison said, setting down his spotting scope and focusing his full attention on Sarah. "This isn't just a training exercise, and I apologize for not being completely transparent from the beginning." Sarah felt her guard go up slightly, though she maintained her relaxed posture. Years of military experience had taught her to be cautious when situations weren't what they initially appeared to be. 3 weeks ago, Harrison continued, we received intelligence about a potential terrorist operation being planned in the remote mountain region north of here. The target is a small research facility that develops defensive technologies for the Department of Defense. Kim secured his rifle and joined the conversation, his expression serious and professional. The facility is located in an extremely isolated area, accessible only by a single mountain road. Traditional security measures are limited due to the location and the classified nature of the research being conducted. Sarah listened carefully, beginning to understand the real purpose of their extreme long-range shooting practice. "You're developing a defensive capability," she said. "Long-range interdiction of potential threats before they can reach the facility." "Exactly," Harrison confirmed. "The geography of the area provides several observation points at distances between 8,000 and 9,500 yards from the facility. If we can establish effective long-range capabilities at those distances, we can provide security coverage that would be impossible to achieve through conventional means." The explanation made sense from a tactical perspective. Remote facilities were inherently vulnerable to attack, particularly if they were located in areas where traditional security measures were impractical. Long-range precision shooting could provide an effective deterrent while maintaining the low profile necessary for classified operations. "Why not use military or federal law enforcement resources?" Sarah asked. "The facility officially doesn't exist," Kim explained. "The research being conducted there is so highly classified that even acknowledging its existence would compromise national security. We need capabilities that can be deployed without official government oversight or acknowledgement." Sarah understood the implications. Contractors operating in legal gray areas weren't uncommon in the defense industry, particularly for operations that required absolute deniability. The fact that Harrison and Kim were approaching the problem with such technical precision suggested they were serious professionals with legitimate government connections. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" she said directly. Harrison pulled out a folder from his equipment bag and handed it to Sarah. "We'd like you to consider joining our team as a primary sniper. The operation would involve establishing observation posts in the mountains and maintaining overwatch security for the research facility." Sarah opened the folder and found detailed topographical maps of the area Harrison had described, along with technical specifications for the shooting positions and target areas. The documentation was thorough and professional, clearly the product of serious planning and intelligence gathering. "The longest shots would be in the 92 to 9,500 yard range," Kim added. "We've been working up to these distances for months, but we need someone with proven combat experience and the ability to perform under pressure." As Sarah studied the maps and documentation, she found herself impressed by the level of detail and planning involved. The operation was complex and challenging, requiring skills that few people possessed. The opportunity to use her specialized training in a mission with real national security implications was appealing. "What's the timeline?" she asked. "We need to be operational within 2 weeks," Harrison replied. "Intelligence suggests the threat may materialize sometime in the next month. We can't provide more specific details without a commitment from you, but the potential consequences of failure are significant." Sarah closed the folder and looked at both men carefully. The opportunity was exactly the kind of challenging, meaningful work she had been hoping to find since leaving the Marines. The technical aspects of extreme long-range shooting had always fascinated her, and the chance to apply those skills in defense of important national security interests was compelling. However, she had learned to be cautious about operations that weren't officially sanctioned. The legal and personal risks associated with contractor work in gray areas could be significant, particularly if something went wrong. "I need more detailed information about the legal framework and support structure," she said. "Command authority, rules of engagement, logistical support, legal protection if things go sideways." All legitimate concerns, Harrison acknowledged. We have authorization letters from appropriate government authorities, although the specific agencies involved must remain classified until you're fully committed. Legal protection is comprehensive, including both criminal and civil immunity for actions taken in accordance with mission parameters. Kim pulled out a tablet computer and showed Sarah several photographs of the research facility and surrounding terrain. The facility itself is small, maybe 30 people working on advanced materials research. But the potential military applications of their work make it an extremely high-value target for foreign intelligence services and terrorist organizations. The photographs showed a modern but unobtrusive complex nestled in a mountain valley, surrounded by dense forest and rugged terrain. Sarah could immediately see why traditional security measures would be challenging to implement. The isolation that protected the facility from casual observation also made it vulnerable to determined attackers. The beauty of the long-range approach, Harrison explained, is that we can provide effective security coverage while maintaining complete invisibility. No one expects sniper overwatch at distances approaching 6 miles. Sarah studied the terrain features visible in the photographs, automatically analyzing potential shooting positions and fields of fire. Her military training kicked in as she considered the tactical challenges and opportunities presented by the geography. Weather conditions in that area could be challenging, she observed. Mountain winds, temperature variations, precipitation. All of those factors would significantly complicate long-range shots. True, Kim agreed. That's another reason we need someone with extensive field experience. Range shooting is one thing, but operating in adverse conditions with real-world pressure requires a different level of skill and mental toughness. As Sarah considered the proposal, she found herself genuinely excited about the technical and professional challenges involved. The opportunity to push the boundaries of long-range precision shooting while contributing to legitimate national security objectives was exactly what she had been looking for. But professional excitement had to be balanced against practical considerations. The legal and financial aspects of the arrangement needed to be clearly defined, and she wanted to understand exactly what level of support would be available if complications arose. Compensation? She asked directly. $200,000 for the initial 2-month deployment, Harrison replied without hesitation. Bonus payments for successful mission completion. All expenses covered, including equipment, transportation, and insurance. The financial terms were generous, reflecting both the specialized skills required and the importance of the mission. Sarah's current consulting work was profitable, but nothing approaching that level of compensation. "I'd need to review the complete contract terms and legal documentation," she said. "And I want to speak with someone from the authorizing agency to verify the legitimacy of the operation." Completely reasonable, Harrison agreed. "We can arrange a briefing with appropriate personnel tomorrow if you're seriously interested." Kim packed away the tablet and rejoined the conversation. "There's one more factor you should consider," he said. "This isn't a one-time mission. If the long-range security concept proves effective, there will likely be opportunities for similar operations at other sensitive facilities. The potential for long-term career development is significant. The possibility of establishing herself as a specialist in extreme long-range security operations was intriguing. Sarah had been struggling to find a civilian career path that utilized her unique military skills while providing the intellectual and professional challenges she needed to remain engaged. "Before I make any decisions," she said, "I'd like to attempt that shot you've been working on. If I can't perform at the level required, the rest of the discussion becomes academic." Harrison smiled broadly, obviously pleased by her response. "That's exactly what we were hoping you'd say. Dave, can you get the backup rifle set up?" Kim immediately began unpacking a second rifle case from their truck. The backup weapon was virtually identical to his primary rifle, featuring the same precision components and high-end optics. The only difference was the stock configuration, which could be adjusted to match Sarah's shooting preferences. "It'll take about 15 minutes to get everything properly adjusted," Kim explained as he began the setup process. "Then, we'll need to verify zero at shorter distances before attempting the long shot." Sarah felt the familiar pre-mission adrenaline beginning to build. The combination of technical challenge, professional opportunity, and patriotic duty was compelling. If she could successfully make the shot, it would open doors to exactly the kind of career she had been hoping to build. As Kim worked on the rifle setup, Harrison approached Sarah with a more personal expression. "I should probably mention that, Dave, and I have been observing you for several weeks," he said quietly. "We've done our homework on your military record, your current business activities, and your personal background." Sarah wasn't surprised by the revelation. Any legitimate intelligence operation would involve thorough background investigations of potential team members. The fact that they had been observing her suggested a level of professional interest that went beyond casual recruitment. "We know about your service record in Afghanistan," Harrison continued. 14 confirmed kills, several at distances exceeding 1,500 yards. No missed shots on record. Commendations for performance under pressure and exceptional technical proficiency. The recognition of her military achievements was gratifying, though Sarah remained focused on the current situation rather than past accomplishments. Military shooting and civilian contractor work can be very different, she pointed out. Different legal frameworks, different support structures, different consequences for failure. True, Harrison acknowledged. But the fundamental skills remain the same. Precision shooting, environmental assessment, equipment management, and performance under pressure. Those capabilities transfer directly to this type of operation. Kim finished his initial rifle setup and called Sarah over to verify the stock adjustments. "Length of pull, cheek height, and grip angle should be close to your preferences," he said. "We can fine-tune everything after you've had a chance to handle the rifle." Sarah picked up the weapon and immediately appreciated the quality of the components. The rifle was heavier than her own weapon, but the additional weight would provide greater stability for extreme long-range shots. The trigger was crisp and clean, breaking at approximately 2.5 pounds with minimal overtravel. "Excellent setup," she said sincerely. "This should work well for long-range shooting. We'll start with a verification shot at 1,000 yards, Kim explained. "If that looks good, we'll move out to 2,500 yards for a final check before attempting the extreme distance shot." The systematic approach was professional and appropriate. Attempting an extreme shot without first verifying equipment function and shooter compatibility would be reckless and likely to result in failure. As they prepared for the verification process, Sarah found herself mentally committing to the mission. The combination of professional challenge, financial compensation, and national security importance was compelling. If she could successfully demonstrate her capabilities, the opportunity was too good to pass up. But first, she had to make the shot that would prove she belonged on their team. At 9,200 yards, with the bullet in flight for over 10 seconds, facing environmental conditions that could change during the flight time, the challenge was unlike anything she had previously attempted. Sarah settled behind the rifle and began the methodical process of establishing her shooting position. The next few minutes would determine whether her military experience and natural shooting ability could translate to the most extreme challenge of her career. Sarah's hands moved with practiced efficiency as she adjusted the rifle to her shooting preferences. The weapon felt foreign yet familiar, like driving a different car with the same basic controls. The weight distribution was slightly different from her own rifle, and the trigger had a different feel, but the fundamental principles remained the same. "Take your time getting comfortable with the equipment," Kim advised. "We have plenty of ammunition for practice shots, and the weather conditions are stable for at least another 2 hours." Sarah appreciated the lack of pressure as she familiarized herself with the rifle. She adjusted the stock length, cheek piece height, and bipod position until she achieved a natural point of aim that required minimal muscular effort to maintain. Consistency in shooting position was critical for precision work, especially at extreme distances where the smallest variations could result in significant errors. The verification shot at 1,000 yards went perfectly. Sarah's bullet struck within 2 inches of the point of aim, confirming that the rifle's zero was appropriate and that her shooting position was solid. The recoil impulse and sight picture recovery felt natural, suggesting good compatibility between shooter and equipment. "Excellent shot," Harrison observed through his spotting scope. "Dead center hit. The rifle seems to agree with your shooting style." The second verification at 2,500 yards required more careful preparation. At that distance, environmental factors began to play a significant role in bullet trajectory, and the margin for error decreased substantially. Sarah took extra time to study wind conditions and verify her range estimation before taking the shot. Her bullet struck 4 inches high and 2 inches left of the point of aim. At 2,500 yards, that represented exceptional accuracy, well within the standards required for precision shooting. More importantly, the slight error pattern was consistent with her natural shooting tendencies, suggesting that she could compensate for it during the extreme distance attempt. Outstanding shooting, Kim said with obvious approval. That level of accuracy at 2,500 yards indicates excellent technique and equipment compatibility. Sarah felt confident about her ability to work with the rifle system, but the jump from 2,500 yards to over 9,000 was enormous. The additional distance would magnify every small error and introduce complications that were impossible to predict based on shorter-range performance. As they prepared for the extreme distance shot, Harrison reviewed the environmental data one more time. Wind remained steady at 4 to 5 miles per hour from the northwest. Temperature has dropped to 66 degrees, which will slightly increase air density. Barometric pressure is stable, and humidity has decreased to 42%. The environmental changes were minor, but significant at extreme distances. Sarah made mental notes about how each factor would affect bullet trajectory, adding to the complex calculations required for the shot. Kim transferred his firing data to Sarah, including the elevation and windage adjustments he had calculated for the 9,200-yard shot. Based on your shooting pattern at shorter distances, you might want to hold slightly low and right to compensate for your natural tendencies, he suggested. Sarah studied the data on Kim's ballistic computer, noting the extreme values required. The elevation adjustment of 43.1 minutes of angle meant that her rifle would be pointed nearly 3 feet above the target to achieve the rainbow-like trajectory needed to reach the distant impact point. Time of flight will be approximately 10.2 seconds, Harrison added. That's long enough for conditions to change significantly during bullet flight. You'll need to assess the entire trajectory path, not just conditions at the firing point. Sarah understood the complexity involved. At such extreme distance, the bullet would pass through different wind patterns, temperature zones, and air densities during its flight. Predicting all of these factors accurately was as much art as science. She settled into her final shooting position and began the methodical process of preparing for the shot. Her breathing slowed and deepened as she entered the focused mental state that had served her well during combat operations. External distractions faded away as she concentrated entirely on the technical aspects of the challenge. Through the high-powered scope, the target area was barely visible as a small clearing in the distant forest. At maximum magnification, she could make out the target itself as a tiny speck of contrasting color against the natural background. The sight picture was challenging, requiring perfect focus and steady hold to maintain alignment. Range confirmed at 9,196 yards, Kim reported. Elevation setting 431. Windage setting 18 left. Sarah verified the scope settings and established her natural point of aim. The rifle wanted to settle naturally on the target with minimal effort from her muscles, indicating proper body position and equipment setup. Wind check complete, Harrison announced from his spotting position. Steady 4 miles per hour from northwest across entire trajectory path. Mirage patterns indicate stable conditions. You are clear to fire when ready. Sarah controlled her breathing, settling into the natural respiratory pause between exhalation and inhalation. The crosshairs settled on the tiny target as she applied gradual pressure to the trigger. Her focus narrowed to exclude everything except sight alignment and trigger control. The rifle fired with a sharp crack that echoed across the range. Through her scope, Sarah could see the bullet trace as it arced high into the air, following the calculated trajectory toward the distant target. The flight seemed to take forever, giving her time to second-guess every aspect of her preparation and execution. Bullet trace observed, Harrison reported from his spotting scope. Trajectory appears stable. Flight path tracking as calculated. Time mark, 8 seconds, 9, 10 impact. Sarah held her breath, waiting for Harrison to call the result. The silence stretched for several seconds as he confirmed what he had observed through the spotting scope. Miss, Harrison announced. Approximately 12 yards right and 8 yards long. Sarah felt a mixture of disappointment and determination. The miss was relatively small considering the distance involved, but it was still a miss. At such extreme range, being close wasn't good enough for operational requirements. Wind must have been stronger than estimated across the middle portion of the trajectory, she said, analyzing the shot results. The long impact suggests slightly lower air density than calculated. Kim nodded in agreement as he made notes in his shooting log. The right deflection is consistent with stronger crosswind than we measured at the firing point. Mountain terrain can create wind patterns that vary significantly across long distances. Sarah studied the miss pattern and considered the adjustments needed for a second attempt. The error was systematic rather than random, suggesting that her shooting technique was solid, but the environmental assessment needed refinement. I'd like to try again with a correction for stronger wind, she said. Hold about 1 minute left and half a minute low to compensate for the observed error pattern. Harrison checked his weather monitoring equipment and studied the mirage patterns visible through his spotting scope. Wind appears to be increasing slightly, he reported, now reading 5 to 6 miles per hour with occasional gusts to 7. The changing conditions added another layer of complexity to an already challenging shot. Sarah would need to time her shot to coincide with a lull in the wind, while also accounting for the stronger overall conditions. As she prepared for her second attempt, Sarah found herself drawing on lessons learned during combat operations in Afghanistan. The pressure of knowing that lives depended on her accuracy, the need to perform under adverse conditions, and the importance of learning from misses rather than being discouraged by them. Take your time, Kim advised. We have all day, and the conditions should remain workable for at least another hour. Sarah appreciated the lack of time pressure as she settled into her shooting position for the second attempt. She made the calculated adjustments to her point of aim and began the careful process of timing her shot with the wind conditions. The second shot felt better from the moment she pressed the trigger. Her sight picture was steadier, her trigger control smoother, and her confidence higher. The bullet trace looked more consistent as it arced toward the target. Impact observed, Harrison announced after the 10-second flight time. Approximately 4 yards left and 2 yards short. Much better. The second shot had been significantly more accurate, missing by less than 5 yards at a distance of over 5 miles. Sarah felt genuinely proud of the improvement, though she knew that operational requirements would demand even greater precision. Outstanding correction, Kim said with obvious admiration. That level of accuracy at this distance puts you in very select company. Most shooters never achieve hits at ranges beyond 4,000 yards. Sarah felt the satisfaction of a job well done, but also the perfectionist drive to achieve an actual hit rather than just a close miss. The technical challenge of extreme long-range shooting had engaged both her analytical mind and competitive spirit. One more attempt, she said. I think I can nail it this time. Harrison smiled at her determination. That's exactly the attitude we need for this type of work. The willingness to keep pushing until you achieve the required standard. For her third attempt, Sarah made only minor adjustments to her aim point. The previous shot had been very close, suggesting that her environmental assessment and technique were nearly correct. Fine-tuning rather than major corrections would be more appropriate. The wind conditions had stabilized again, reading a steady 5 miles per hour from the northwest. Sarah waited for a brief lull before taking her shot, timing the trigger press to coincide with the most favorable moment. The third shot felt perfect from the instant of firing. Her sight picture was rock steady, trigger control was smooth, and the rifle's recoil was managed perfectly. The bullet trace looked ideal as it followed the calculated trajectory toward the distant target. Sarah maintained her shooting position as the bullet flew toward the target, fighting the urge to immediately look up from her scope. Maintaining follow-through was critical for consistency, even though the shot had already been fired. Impact, Harrison began, then paused as he confirmed what he was seeing through his spotting scope. The silence stretched for several seconds, building tension as Sarah waited for the result. Hit, Harrison announced excitedly. Direct hit on target. Outstanding shooting. Sarah felt a surge of elation and professional satisfaction unlike anything she had experienced since leaving military service. Successfully hitting a target at 9,200 yards represented the absolute pinnacle of precision shooting, an achievement that few people in the world had accomplished. Kim walked over to congratulate her, his expression showing genuine respect and admiration. "That was an exceptional shot," he said. "You've just demonstrated shooting ability that puts you in the top tier of long-range marksmen worldwide." Harrison was equally impressed as he reviewed his observations through the spotting scope. "Perfect center hit," he confirmed. "The shot was technically flawless and demonstrates exactly the level of capability we need for this operation." As the adrenaline from the successful shot began to fade, Sarah found herself considering the broader implications of what had just occurred. She had proven her ability to perform at the level required for the mission, opening the door to exactly the kind of career opportunity she had been seeking. But, more importantly, she had rediscovered the sense of purpose and professional fulfillment that had been missing since her transition to civilian life. The combination of technical challenge, teamwork, and service to country that had defined her military career was available again, in a different form but with the same fundamental satisfaction. "So," Harrison said with a smile, "are you interested in joining our team?" Sarah looked at the target in the distance, then at the two men who had just offered her the opportunity of a lifetime. The decision that would define the next phase of her career suddenly seemed very clear. Sarah stood at the shooting bench, still processing the magnitude of what had just occurred. The successful hit at 9,200 yards represented more than just exceptional marksmanship. It was validation of years of training, proof of her ability to perform under pressure, and confirmation that her transition from military to civilian life could include the kind of meaningful work she had been seeking. "I'm definitely interested," she said, though her practical nature demanded one final verification. "But I want to review all the documentation tonight and speak with your authorizing official tomorrow before making a final commitment." Harrison nodded approvingly. "Prudent approach. We wouldn't want someone on our team who made important decisions without proper due diligence." Kim began packing up the equipment as they spoke, his movements efficient and practiced. "The briefing tomorrow will be comprehensive," he said. "Legal framework, operational procedures, equipment specifications, and detailed mission parameters. Everything you need to make an informed decision." As Sarah helped gather their gear, she found herself analyzing the afternoon from a professional perspective. The technical challenge had been extraordinary, but equally impressive was the level of preparation and professionalism demonstrated by Harrison and Kim. Their approach to extreme long-range shooting reflected serious training and substantial investment in equipment and expertise. "How long have you two been working together?" she asked. "About 18 months, Harrison replied. "Dave was recommended to me by mutual contacts in the special operations community. I recruited him specifically for this type of precision shooting work." Kim shouldered his rifle case and joined the conversation. "Colonel Harrison has been developing long-range security concepts for about 3 years. The idea is to provide protective capabilities for sensitive facilities that can't be adequately secured through conventional means." The concept made sense from both tactical and strategic perspectives. Remote facilities involved in classified research were inherently vulnerable, but their isolation also created opportunities for innovative security approaches. Long-range precision shooting could provide effective protection while maintaining the low profile necessary for classified operations. As they walked back toward the main range facility, Sarah considered the practical implications of joining their team. The work would involve extended deployments in remote locations, operating under conditions that would test both her technical skills and mental resilience. But it would also provide exactly the kind of professional challenge and national service mission that had been missing from her civilian career. "What's the typical deployment schedule?" she asked. "Varies depending on threat assessment," Harrison explained. "Some missions are short-term, lasting only a few weeks. Others might extend for several months. The mountain facility assignment we discussed could potentially last through the winter, depending on intelligence developments." Sarah appreciated his honesty about the uncertainty involved. Contractor work in the security industry rarely offered predictable schedules, particularly when dealing with emerging threats and classified operations. Her current consulting business had similar unpredictability, but without the excitement and sense of purpose that military-style operations provided. Her phone buzzed with another text message from Marcus, reminding her about the Henderson Industries contract extension. The message seemed to come from a different world, the routine corporate security work that had been her primary focus for the past 8 months. The contrast with the afternoon's events was stark. "I should mention that I have a business partner," Sarah said. "We run a security consulting firm together. I need to make arrangements for him to handle current contracts if I commit to extended deployments." "Understood," Harrison replied. "We can work around existing obligations to some extent, and the compensation should more than offset any short-term business disruption." Kim pulled out his tablet and showed Sarah additional photographs of the mountain research facility and surrounding terrain. "The site we'd be protecting is genuinely critical to national security," he said. "The research being conducted there has potential applications for defensive systems that could save thousands of lives." The photographs reinforced Sarah's understanding of the mission's importance. The facility was small and unobtrusive, but clearly represented a significant investment in cutting-edge research. Protecting such installations from potential attacks was exactly the kind of meaningful work she had hoped to find in civilian life. As they reached the parking area, Harrison handed Sarah a business card with contact information for the next day's briefing. "Meeting is at 1000 hours at the address shown. Dress is business casual, and plan on about 3 hours for the complete presentation." Sarah studied the card, noting that the address was for a nondescript office building in the downtown business district. The professional presentation suggested legitimate government connections and proper organizational structure. "Will I meet the authorizing officials tomorrow?" she asked. "You'll speak with a representative from the sponsoring agency," Harrison confirmed. "Someone with authority to answer questions about legal protection and operational oversight. Complete transparency about the mission framework." Kim finished loading their equipment into the truck and joined them for final coordination. "Bring any questions you have about equipment specifications, training requirements, or operational procedures," he said. "Tomorrow's briefing is designed to address all aspects of potential team membership." As Sarah walked toward her own vehicle, she felt the familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension that accompanied major career decisions. The opportunity was exactly what she had been hoping for, but the transition would involve significant changes to her current lifestyle and business relationships. Her phone rang as she reached her car. Marcus was calling about the Henderson Industries contract, providing a timely reminder of her current professional obligations. "Hey Marcus," she answered. "I got your message about the contract extension." "Sarah, where are you?" Marcus asked. "I've been trying to reach you all afternoon. Henderson wants to discuss expanding our scope of work, potentially doubling our monthly retainer." Sarah looked back toward Harrison and Kim, who were having their own conversation beside their truck. The contrast between her current business opportunities and the mission that had just been offered was striking. "I'm at the shooting range," she said. "Had an interesting afternoon. Can we talk tonight? I may have some significant news about a potential new direction for my career." Marcus sounded intrigued, but concerned. "New direction? What kind of new direction?" "We're finally building momentum with the consulting business." "I'll explain everything tonight," Sarah promised. "But it might involve extended travel and deployment work, government contracting, using skills that are more directly related to my military background." "Okay," Marcus said slowly. "Sounds like we need to have a serious conversation. Want to meet for dinner? We can discuss both the Henderson opportunity and whatever this new development might be." Sarah agreed to meet Marcus at their usual restaurant that evening. The conversation would be important for both her business partnership and personal decision-making process. Marcus had been her closest friend since their military service together, and his perspective would be valuable as she considered her options. After ending the call, Sarah spent several minutes sitting in her car, processing the events of the afternoon. The successful shot at 9,200 yards had been personally satisfying, but the broader opportunity represented a chance to rebuild the sense of purpose and professional fulfillment that had defined her military career. Her transition to civilian life had been successful from a financial perspective, but had left her feeling disconnected from the work that had given her life meaning. The precision shooting mission offered a chance to use her specialized skills in service of important national security objectives, while also providing the technical challenges and teamwork that she had missed. As she drove home, Sarah found herself mentally preparing for the decisions that lay ahead. The briefing tomorrow would provide the information needed to make an informed choice, but she already sensed that her answer would be positive. The opportunity was too good to pass up, and the successful shot that afternoon had proven her capability to perform at the required level. That evening's conversation with Marcus proved to be both supportive and practical. He understood her desire to return to more meaningful work and offered to manage their consulting business during her deployments. The Henderson Industries expansion could provide steady income for the firm while giving Sarah the freedom to pursue special operations contracting. "You've been restless for months," Marcus observed over dinner. "This sounds like exactly what you need to get back to being the person you were in the Marines." His support was important, but Sarah also valued his practical questions about the legal and financial aspects of the opportunity. Marcus had always been the more cautious of the two partners, and his concerns helped her think through potential complications and risks. The next morning's briefing exceeded Sarah's expectations for thoroughness and professionalism. The government representative was a senior official from the Department of Defense's Special Access Programs Office, someone with clear authority and detailed knowledge of the mission requirements. The legal framework was comprehensive, providing criminal and civil immunity for actions taken within mission parameters. The operational procedures were detailed and professional, reflecting serious planning and proper oversight. The equipment and training support were extensive, including access to specialized ranges and technical resources that few civilians ever experienced. By the end of the 3-hour presentation, Sarah had no remaining doubts about the legitimacy or importance of the mission. The opportunity to protect critical national security assets while using her specialized skills at the absolute limits of capability was irresistible. "I accept," she said as the briefing concluded. "When do we start training for the mountain deployment?" Harrison smiled broadly, clearly pleased by her decision. "Welcome to the team," he said. "Training begins Monday morning. We have 2 weeks to prepare for deployment, which should be sufficient time to integrate you fully into our operational procedures." As Sarah left the briefing, she felt the familiar excitement of beginning a new mission. The civilian security consulting work had been profitable but routine. This new opportunity promised the kind of challenges and professional satisfaction that had drawn her to military service originally. 3 weeks later, Sarah found herself lying behind her rifle on a mountain ridge at dawn, scanning the forest below through her high-powered scope. The research facility was barely visible in the valley 6 miles away, a small complex that represented years of advanced scientific research and potentially revolutionary defensive technologies. The morning was crisp and clear, with light winds and excellent visibility. Perfect conditions for long-range observation and shooting if required. Sarah felt completely at peace, surrounded by the tools of her trade and engaged in work that mattered. Her radio crackled softly with a position report from Kim, who was manning a similar observation post on a ridge 3 miles to the south. Harrison coordinated their activities from a command post equipped with communications gear and intelligence monitoring equipment. As the sun climbed higher, Sarah reflected on the path that had brought her to this mountain ridge. The chance encounter at the shooting range that had changed everything. The moment when a casual question about her shooting abilities had opened doors to exactly the career she had been seeking. Sometimes the most important moments in life came disguised as ordinary afternoons, she realized. Sometimes a quiet conversation could lead to extraordinary opportunities. And sometimes, when someone approached you with a simple question like, "Think you can hit 9,200?" the answer could change your entire future. Sarah smiled as she continued her surveillance of the valley below, knowing that she was exactly where she belonged.